Hey yo! I'm Miss Linnea Lark, a high school art and ceramics teacher. Today I'll be showing you how to create that gradient or ombre effect with Underglaze. If you want to check out the video where I created this picture, click the link at the top right of your screen. The first thing I usually do when I'm underglazing a pattern or design is brainstorm ideas. Right off the bat, I knew I wanted to create a pattern dedicated to my sweet students. Seriously, they are the best. It's kind of weird that I chose that theme because I literally started this picture a week before we started our pandemic shutdown. I finished this pot the last week of March 2020 and I haven't seen my students since. I mean, if you're watching it today, I still haven't seen them. But if you're watching it in a year, Lord willing, I'll have seen them then. Anyway, right now you're watching me use my generic brainstorming page to think about qualities I hope to pour into my students. Notice that I often Google symbols as well as come up with some of my own. Now that I kind of know what I'm doing with my symbols, I plan out how the images will look for my pattern. I use Google Images and Pinterest to find reference photos. And you'll also notice that I sketch most of the symbols multiple times to help me settle on a design and a size. Onto the pattern. I love to use pattern in my pottery. I'm attracted to the meticulous process and like to get lost in the tedious repetition. I know it's weird. The first step to a pattern is laying down a grid. I start off with a diagonal grid, which will help me roughly space and measure the placement of my symbols. I alternate every axis point between eyes and mouths, and then fill in the negative space with clouds. And the last planning step is to figure out my color scheme. I knew I wanted the background to be purple, not only because our school colors are purple, but because it's also the color of honor. And I want to honor you guys. The first thing I'll be underglazing is my purple background, which will be an ombre gradient. When I'm doing a gradient, I like to mix a solid mid-tone value first, and then take a little bit of that mid-tone and add black for a low light, and then take a little more of that mid-tone and add white to get a highlight. Now that I've got my three distinct and high contrast values, it's time to start painting my underglaze gradient. I start off by dividing my picture into three sections. The top section will be the lightest value and the bottom the darkest value. I make the darkest portion the smallest because underglazes tend to get much darker after they've been glazed. Before I start blending my values to create a gradient, I make sure to paint 3 flat layers of each value in their areas. Underglaze takes a minimum of 3 layers to come out opaque. Any less and your colors will come out patchy. When layering, make sure each layer is 100% dry before applying the next layer. Once I have 3 layers on each purple value, I do the final blended layer. When I'm blending, I like to have 2 to 3 brushes ready to go because underglaze dries ridiculously quickly and I won't have time to wash out my brushes. Because the underglaze dries so quickly, I will have to blend in small sections at a time, which is really not optimal, but is kind of what I gotta do. I like to start by adding a thick, wet layer to the lightest of the 2 colors that I'm currently blending. And while it's still wet, I quickly grab a clean brush and blend the darkest value into the still wet middle value. I go back and forth horizontally, trying to make the blending smooth. I work my way all the way around the picture, blending the 2 darkest colors. Remember to go quickly. I know it's kind of stressful, but the underglaze is going to dry really quickly. Once I'm finished blending the 2 bottom colors, or the 2 darkest colors, I go ahead and start blending the mid-tone with the highlight, the 2 top colors. And so I go around the pot one more time, blending those 2 values. Now, to be really honest with you, this is the first time I've ever done such a large gradient, and it was a challenge. The stinking underglaze dries so stinking fast. and I was pretty stressed out, but I feel like after I struggled a bit, I'd be able to do better the next time. So even though my gradient is a wee bit patchy here and there, I gained important experience and now have more confidence for my next attempt. Win-win. I mean, a little bit of a fail because it's patchy, but still 2 wins. Alright, it's time to draw out my pattern on my pot. Now the bummer about the gradient is that if you mess up, it's nigh impossible to perfectly color match your mistake. So I took a little extra caution and wrapped my dusty, grimy foam with a clean bag to protect my work. And then I block in my grid. It's not perfect, but it'll work just fine. I'm not worried about the ugly pencil marks as they'll burn off in the kiln. But it is smart to have your design planned ahead of time to eliminate mistakes and complications because that gradient will be so hard to patch. You'll notice I'm using graphite paper to trace my drawings onto my picture. This will help my pattern look more exact and speed up the process. But I'm also a fan of hand-drawn patterns that look a little less perfect. The choice is yours. When using graphite paper, make sure that the dark side is facing the pot, or else your image will transfer to the back of your paper instead of to the pot. Don't worry, we've all done it at least once, if not 10 times. Time to mix some more underglazes. One of my favorite things about underglazes is that they're very predictable and mix just like paint. This allows me to mix interesting colors and create varied color schemes. Whenever I'm mixing underglazes, I'm usually chanting in my head, "It will get way darker, it will get way darker, it will get way darker, it will get way darker." Just to remind myself that all of my values are going to come out significantly darker than what they appear right now. Time to paint my pot. Remember that underglaze is clay-based, unlike glaze which is glass-based. Because underglaze is clay-based, made of clay, as long as you put 3 to 4 layers of underglaze down, it will not be see-through, and you will not be able to see even the darkest purple through your top layers. Some colors require more layers than the typical 3. If your underglaze sounds like sloshing water when you shake it, it will probably require 4 or more layers. When I'm using yellow, I always do a minimum of 4 layers, if not more. And sometimes the red as well. As you start getting familiar with which underglazes tend to run thin and splotchy, you'll get better and better. It just takes a little time, and unfortunately, a little bit of failure. And a little tip is that if your underglaze is really watery, you can also take its lid off for the night, and a lot of the water will evaporate out, so you won't require so many layers. And I like my underglazes the consistency of school glue. Nice and thick, but not so thick that it dries bumpy. Needs to still be smooth, but thick. Smooth, but thick.
Find a little spot in the shade, pink lemonade, pink lemonade. Everything is going my way, pink lemonade, pink lemonade.
I take a sip and I'm in heaven. The dopamine is dripping on my brain. Imagination's at 11. Reality is gonna fade away. I might go to Monte Carlo. I might spend $1 million floating down the Riviera. Now I'm Elon Musk. Find a little spot in the shade, pink lemonade, pink lemonade. Everything is going my way, pink lemonade, pink lemonade. Rolling in my black Bugatti, everything is A-okay. Find a little spot in the shade, sipping, sipping, sipping. The world is crumbling around me, I hardly notice it at all. Maybe I'll chill and make a grilled cheese and go and walk around the mall.
Don't forget to be very careful when painting on top of the gradient. Like I said, mistakes are hard to fix on a gradient. In fact, I totally botched my gradient at the very last brushstroke, which was incredibly frustrating. The camera angle didn't catch it, but I'll be sure to point it out in the finished product video. This was a major bummer. But I just told myself what I tell my students when they botch something up really bad and are looking at me with really sad, disappointed eyes. I tell them, it's okay. It gives it a nice homemade vibe. I didn't realize I said that all the time until the kids picked up on it. And now they like insult each other by saying that it's got that nice homemade vibe. But it's true, I like a nice homemade vibe.
Side with the Queen of Sheba. Now I've got the royal flush. Nothing in the world is sweeter. Got that sugar rush. I find a little spot in the shade. Pink lemonade. Pink lemonade. Pink lemonade. Rolling in my black Bugatti. Everything is A-okay. Find a little spot in the shade. Sipping, sipping, sipping. Pink lemonade. Pink lemonade.
Once I'm done underglazing, I stick my picture in my bisque firing. FYI, underglaze is safe to go into a bisque firing or a glaze firing. However, I rarely allow my students this luxury because they typically forget the difference between underglazes and glazes, and mixing up the two in a bisque firing always has disastrous results. Always. All the time. Spoiler alert, there's my panderfly. But I didn't like the purple color on it, so I'm gonna re-underglaze it. Anyway, you'll see that tutorial hopefully before Christmas. Before I start overglazing my pitcher to make it waterproof, I have to prep both my glazes. On the inside, I'll be using AMACO's Low Fire Satin Pink, and on the outside, I'll be using AMACO's Low Fire Clear Matte Glaze. Both of these glazes are temperamental at best. They tend to thicken up and grow oogalites. Yeah, that's a real word. An oogolite is like, I don't know, you guys. It's like a little rock formation that if it sits too long and isn't used, it starts growing these little pebbles inside of the glazes. And when you fire those pebbles, they leave like a little black spot, which is undesirable. So I have to add water to get them to the runny spool glue consistency, and then I strain them with my 80 mesh sieve. That thing's invaluable. If you don't have a sieve, go get yourself a sieve. You need a sieve. And a blender. That blender's nice. Get yourself a blender while you're at it. Time to apply my glazes. I start by pouring the satin pink into my pitcher, carefully rolling it around and then pouring it out. I definitely should have added more water to the satin pink. It was way too thick, and I ended up having to suck out a lot of that glaze because it just went on way too thick. I make sure to sponge off the rim of the pink so it's nice and clean. When applying the clear matte, I am extra careful because it is a fickle glaze. If put on too thick, it will fire milky, like almost white, instead of clear. So I'm extra careful to apply 3 very thin coats, allowing each coat to dry completely before adding the next. And then it's time for the glaze firing. And this is what it looked like. Alright, you guys, check out the final product. Let's watch it go around a few times and see if you can find the area where I totally messed up my gradient with a bad patch job. Yep, there it is. I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial on how to use underglaze to create a gradient. If you want to stick around, I'm going to share what my symbols mean for my kiddos. Alright, baby birds, here's what I hope to pour into each and every one of you. Symbol number 1 is the cat eye with the wings. The cat represents courage, which is kind of funny because scaredy cat is a thing, but whatever. I think they're courageous. They jump really far places, you know what I mean? The eye symbolizes truth and the wings are freedom. The pink is for love and the yellow is for joy. Symbol number 2 is an empty smile floating on a parachute through the clouds. The smile is for humor, and I hope you all know how much I love to laugh. The mouth is empty to represent humility and empathy. The parachute is also a symbol for love because love is what will save your lives. I mean, did Harry Potter teach you nothing? The pattern and art itself represents passion, and I hope you all find yours. Even if it's not art. You could be passionate about spreadsheets. I don't know. Anything. Just find a passion, people. I love you all so much. I miss your faces and maybe your laughter the most. I miss your hugs and high fives and your help. No, seriously, you guys. There's no detention on quarantine, and so my classroom is a wreck. I really miss detention kids. I also desperately miss making art with all of you and just chilling and swapping stories. I can't wait to be back with you in person because you pour just as much into me as I pour into you, and I miss you terribly. And to all you other teachers out there, you are killing it. Keep it up, seriously. I hope you'll find the time for peace and to recharge because all your kids need you happy and healthy. Cry your tears, scream into your pillows, find ways to make things easier, funner, and more lovely. Treat yourself kindly and accept the fact that we are all in stinking survival mode. We're all just struggling to get through every day, and this will probably not be the best years of our career, but remember, you're not alone, and there's nothing wrong with watching an amazing and artistic movie when you just need a break. I highly recommend Fantastic Mr. Fox for pretty much all age groups. If any of you guys out there know a teacher, please send them some love and encouragement. They desperately need it and deserve it. We got this. We're going to get through it together. Remember that and happy day.